Welcome. Thank you for joining the online Q&A for I'm No Longer Here, Ya no estoy aquí. I'm Gwen Deglis, Deputy Director for the American Cinematheque, and I'd like to invite you to visit our website, americancinematheque.com, to find information about our upcoming program and how you can support the American Cinematheque by making a donation and becoming a member. I would like to thank Netflix for this Q&A with writer-director Fernando Frías de la Parra. Moderating is Richard Peña, Director Emeritus of the New York Film Festival and Professor of Film and Media Studies at Columbia University. Enjoy.
Okay, I think it's time for us to begin. Hey, Fernando, great to see you.
Hi, Richard. Such an honor to be talking to you.
My pleasure, and thank you very much for the film. I have lots of questions, and I know there are a lot of audience questions, so let me get right to it. There's much to talk about, but first, sort of out of curiosity, and also in terms of the film, I want to start off with cumbia. I know something about cumbia colombiano and its role in that country, but when did cumbia migrate to Mexico? And especially, when did it become part of youth culture in Mexico?
Yeah, so, cumbia, the word cumbia itself, it's a word from African origin. In Colombia, it's combining many different things, enslaved people in Colombia dance, they say like with small little steps because of their feet being tied together. So we could say that cumbia since the beginning, it's sound of resistance, and their lyrics mostly are very melancholic, and there's like different kind of cumbias, many different kind of cumbias, cumbia villera, psychedelic cumbia, electro cumbia, like you name it. But so in Mexico, it's important to say that a lot of cumbia arrived, in Mexico City, for example, and there was something called sonideros, which is like the block parties, like the classical thing with the DJ saying the name of the neighborhood and stuff, and but the important thing is that Monterrey, it's the first industrial city in the whole Latin America, and because of it was founded by only 12 families. It's almost like the closest, practically the border with Texas, so they influence a lot of like, like Texan pragmatism and a lot of like culture of money and the hats and the boots and norteño culture. But so Monterrey needed labor, and they needed immigrants from other parts of Mexico and other parts of Latin America. So they started populating the settlements around Monterrey, and these hills, or in the periphery, if you want, and they, as displaced people, or people that migrate as a community, they started connecting with the cumbia because they identified with the lyrics specifically. How much I miss my little shack next to the ocean. Oh, how much I miss the sun. Oh, how much, it's all about that. And some ethnomusicologists said that the only cumbia that survived in Monterrey is that one with accordion, because there's so many cumbias, and they say that the accordion is the voice of regret, voice of longing also, So there's a very important guy called Celso Piña who is from Monterrey, but and his band is called Bogotá, Ronda Bogotá. So it stayed in Monterrey, and this is around the 60s. But the funny thing is that it's so it comes with the immigrants, but then also with people in Houston, Texas, Mexican immigrants in Texas, they are also having this block party. So it comes to Monterrey in the middle of Mexico City and Houston. So it becomes a thing, and especially again, a sound of resistance. And the fact that it's rebajada, it's even after, and that's darker. We can talk about that too.
I was fascinated by the way in which the dancers seem to, perhaps in our imagination, have a kind of link perhaps to indigenous culture. I mean, their hairstyles, and especially even I think their dancing, at least to me, looked like indigenous dance. Is that a factor, or is that something I'm reading into their movements?
I think it can be both, right? Because so one very important thing that I learned on the process of researching this this film. It's I and I have to thank this Colombian anthropologist Darío Blanco, who published a book for the University of Mexico in Monterrey. Because he was Colombian, he granted, access. So they were, oh, you're from Colombia. And, they called themselves Colombia. So you're Colombian, you're welcome. And he was saying that all of these elements, have a meaning. Of course, it's hard to track down the origin. If like the hair, it's like pre-Hispanic, or like, of course, the use of the space might sound like look like a ritual-esque thing, from like ancestral. To me, Richard, I think, and the whole film is about resistance, about belonging, and about dignity and identification. So, maybe these kids who are like fourth or fifth generation of like people who are oppressed, systematically, and identified with almost like an urban design that wants them to stay outside. They want to reinvent themselves. They choose their language, and maybe it's not a verbal language in with which eloquently they can respond. But as every countercultural movement, they are inherently contestatory, and they're responding to this marginalization. So like, oh, you think that because I'm from the barrio, and because I look ugly and dark skin, I'm dangerous? Well, I embraced your prejudgment, and your rejection, and I take it, and I'm not gonna be like, poor and insignificant forever, and I'm not gonna believe in this system that wants me to go to school, and I'm not gonna go to church. I'm not gonna like obey my family. I'm gonna form my own family with my own gang, with my people. I'm gonna change my name. So, and when the time of dancing comes, it's the same, Richard, than when the names are mentioned. Like, because they change their name. It's not Fernando or Ricardo. You choose another name, and when the DJ on the radio or the guy at the party says that name, it's an affirmation of your chosen existence, right? And the same of the dancing. It's just like slow and like, watch me now, like a bird almost, like a ritual, like this is this is the person that I'm choosing to be. And that's why the same with clothes, like some people can say, oh, it's baggy. Does it come from cholos or what? It's like, yeah, cholos come from Chicanos come from suits, so, there's a whole thing there
It's
of
a
like
long
wanting,
lineage.
exactly, of
Yeah.
wanting to use more space maybe. So we can read a lot into different elements, and we'll never have an exact answer. The same with the slow down cumbia. Why is it so slow down and dark? But we can definitely identify certain social aspects with what's happening, and relate
Could
to
you
them.
talk about the cast? I've read that they're non-professionals, whatever that means nowadays. Could you talk about the process of choosing them, and especially about your lead, who's really a remarkable figure? And was he already this extraordinary dancer when he came into the film, or was that part of the training process?
When Juan Daniel was 4 years old,
Yeah.
He accidentally had a car pass on top of his legs, and he broke his legs from a very young age. He never had like proper medical help, and never healed correctly. So by the time we found him, he didn't know how to dance at all, and he learned to dance.
Unbelievable.
He learned to dance for the film. And Richard, I would tell you that from all of the components of the film, or all of the experiences that are involved in the film, casting process and working with the kids, for me, it's like the richest, and the one that I will treasure the most forever, because like we impacted each other in such a way that we created some sort of like a family, or at least the feeling of that, and Los Tercos didn't exist. They didn't know each other, and now they do. And 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 I want to say that I cannot talk generally about the casting, because behind every one of these persons, there's a story, a unique story of how we found each other, which sacrifices they had to make to come join and make maybe a second audition or a callback, and which sacrifices the production, or not sacrifices, but which like things that are maybe out of the protocol in terms of like a filmmaking and industry, we had to do to like create some sort of like a bubble in which we could like have these tercos happen. And of course, when people say about professional actors and non-professional actors, what I say is that when the first time the camera was rolling, what I had in front of me were professional actors. You know, my DP Damian was worried that maybe like the language we chose, you know, like of course we had a little manifest. Or we didn't want to be like the social film with the telling you how to
Right.
feel with the handheld. Place was very important, especially being a film in structure in that way. You know, he said, well, my only concern is about them, you know, like not histrionically acting, but hitting the marks and all of that. But the first day he was like, oh my God, I'm really impressed. And the kids learned super fast. And so for me, they were professional actors since we started shooting. And some people ask me, did you ever consider working with people who had previous experience acting? But in the case of this film, it would be a contradiction, because
Right.
these kids come from this world and we are representing this world. And by that young age also, it would be like really difficult to find someone. And the slang, Richard, you know Spanish, you know, like how like rich and florid this language is, you know.
Mhm. Talk a little bit also about the screenplay. Was there a sort of written screenplay, which then you went to film, or was it much more kind of something that evolved over time in terms of your work with the actors and the situations you found?
That's a great question. There was a screenplay, a screenplay all the way through. You know, like up until the third draft, I decided to have this parallel structure. You know, like going back and forth, the intertwined New
Right.
York and Monterrey. The reason was, you know, like a lot of people would imagine that Monterrey is like something we haven't seen before, and the kid is dancing,
Yeah.
and it's more exciting, maybe, you know, like maybe as an audience. And I had that very clear. New York, we've seen many times. And I thought that even if it was linear, we would be in the shoes of the character and we will be longing for Monterrey, right? But there was also like this also little manifest, too, part of the manifest of like, for me, emotions need to be like one step ahead and then logical, rational information, you know? And I wanted to be somehow disorienting at the beginning so that we were connected emotionally with the character before we understood completely what was going on. So that was for that I needed a very precise script. So the script was written like that, and the only thing that changed in the editing is that we start in a different place that where we normally would have started. I have to say that of course all of the experiences we had enriched incredibly the script. Like each scene, for example, it came from something real, you know, like all of the news are real, or like the voice of the president is a real one. So we would be rehearsing with that. And sometimes by doing improvisation exercises, I would say don't break out of character. Just like, and don't go to a corner. Like you have to keep being active. You don't know when I'm gonna say cut, you know. And we did multiple exercises. We did like short films, and they were shooting and sometimes doing different roles and editing, you know, or directing, or calling each other's attention. So one example I can give you, or like two actual real good examples that things were not written. Um, after a couple of weeks rehearsing, we took the kids to a place with a swimming pool to do like a barbecue, and the little one, sudadera, sweatshirt, started singing, you know, and started singing Lejanía, you
Yeah.
know, and I didn't know he could sing, and he could sing so well. So I told him, you have to sing in the film. And he said, no, no, no. And then he came and said, well, if you buy me a baseball hat, because people will make fun of my neighborhood with this haircut, because it's something it's no longer in you know, in trend. It's 10 years ago. I said, okay. And he sang. And in that scene in which he gets recruited or initiated, you know, like by the gang, there's a kid who comes with a plastic bag, and when the little kid says like, oh, these shorts are too big for me, and he ties on the belt things, and he said like, don't worry, here's a little trick that I learned from my dad in prison. And that line, for example, came from real life. That kid who I told, Pequecillo, you have to talk, and whatever you have to say, say it. And that comes from his real experience in life, you know. And then so a lot of elements, very important, came from that, you know.
One of the things I admired so much about the film is that I felt that almost any moment I wasn't really sure what was going to happen next. not only because of the fragmented style, but it just seemed a film that was free in a way of really moving in different directions. And then when I came to the ending, I again admired the fact you have a very open ending. You really don't leave us with a kind of final summation or verdict or whatever on Ulysses. Can you talk about that? Was that always your idea to have this open ending?
Yes, absolutely. You know, like I don't have a big body of work, but every project that I've had, that I've worked on, I know the ending, like the first thing, and then it's all how to get there. So that place, that shot, you know, it's what he was running out of battery, you know, and a lot of people tell me, and I refuse to respond when people ask me what happened to Ulysses afterwards, and I would say, like, even though we might have the pieces of to imagine something, because we see that one of his friends became a born again Christian and he's rapping, you know,
Right.
maybe a way out. The other one is dead after joining the cartels. So my idea was always like to end on an ouch note for the audience member, and think, what's next, what's he gonna do? And he is just like one drop of water in the ocean, you know, like how many kids like him, you know, like, so it's an open ending for sure in that way, you know, and at that moment, and now what, you know, and I think I thought it could be like it would have that impact, you know, of like suggesting people or asking the question, you know, now what's going to happen with this guy, you know?
Mm-hmm. Something you alluded to before is really the way that the film is shot. And I want to say, I just think your cinematographer does a great job. He really is a wonderfully talented guy. But exactly what you mentioned, that in a way you go against the contemporary style, or we could even call it cliche, of sort of lots of handheld shots and running down the street and a very gritty look. And if anything, your film is really elegant. I mean, it's beautifully lit and the shots are really well composed. Obviously, that was a strong decision on your part. Can you talk about why you wanted to go that way as opposed to the sort of more typical social realist approach?
Of course, you know, like one thing I knew, you know, like, for example, that this was meant to be way more Pichote than City of God in one way, you know, like I had it clear that it was not so much about like the flashiness of the place that can be very interesting and seductive, but it was more about like how the characters move within that space. It was more about the character, you know, and the place being a character itself, and you know, like the similarities and the differences between the two places. Sometimes, you know, by having like similar shots from both places, like the differences will pop out, or sometimes we will be able to do like a very clear difference angle, because, you know, in New York there's not even space to frame, you know, and Monterrey is all of the opposite. So it's this suggestion of like what's actually freedom and opportunity, if like if here you can actually move freely, and home is home at the end of the day. But of course, one thing that was very important was, given the fact that this is like a social, it touches upon social issues, you know, and comes from real elements in life, with like the war on drugs and those cartels and that administration, you know. I was very confused with the way it was Mexico was representing that in different kind of narratives, you know, because I felt that it created some like some kind of interest only in the tragedy and the violence, and that it was impacting outside, and that big impact outside was informing what people inside Mexico was wanting to do, you know, like and so I tried to clear the air from accents that could suggest this drama, you know, or like or having a score, for example, the same thing, you know.
Right.
It was more the music that the characters would be listening to, and framing in such way. Then I ask myself, like, how can I allow myself to look into the maybe beauty, like you said, you use that word, of this world that it's not unseen, without it feeling exploitive, you know, like, because I wanna frame. Right. I want to frame my character feeling comfortable in that space. He's the king of that place, of that, and how can we not get lost in like showing everything and all of this poverty, you know, that has all of like this appeal sometimes, you know, in the world, as you know. And I thought, and by having this character that it's this place, we use his emotions as the vehicle to look back into the way he remembers, you know. So memory is not always precise, but memory is our emotions. Memories are the way with which what we react to things, you know, like emotions. So we remember things by the way they impact. So those flashbacks, you know, and the way we look at Monterrey in such composed way, it's because we first understand that this is a character that it's missing his place and outside, you know.
Not only Monterrey, but I'd say you made for me one of the best looks at Queens in a long time. And having lived a good part of my life in Queens and whatever, I was really interested in the kind of portrait you give of it. For those of our listeners who don't know, I believe that Queens is the most international county in the United States. I mean, there are 100 and I don't know how many nationalities that live there. But while in a certain way that's a very joyous thing, you capture a certain darkness to Queens that I found very powerful, because indeed I think it's perhaps a side of the immigrant experience we don't see that much.
Yeah, it's a whole system, you know, like, and it's super rich in many ways. Queens, it's incredible. And you know, like that amazing documentary by Private Wiseman, the In Jackson Heights.
In Jackson Heights, yeah.
Yeah, it's incredible. And you can get a feeling there that how many languages are spoken there, 100 and something, you know, and it's crazy, you know. One street is little Colombia, but then you have like the you know, the other communities from from Tibet, from other places, Mongolia,
from
you know,
Bangladesh next door,
Bangladesh, you know? Uruguay, Argentina, then you have Corona with Mexico, then Flushing with Chinese, you know, like it's crazy and it's unique and super powerful. But when you ask me about this maybe like gritty aspect of it, I mean, it's survival. It's the jungle out there sometimes, you know. So when I was like getting inside of those bars in which like women dance, you know, for with Mexican or Central American immigrants, you know, like they are like very interesting people, you know, and the character of Gladys is inspired of someone who was like full of guilt. She had a son in Colombia who didn't know what she was doing for, and she was working for a guy in a place where they asked her, you know, you have to prey on the loneliness of Mexican immigrants. And the more they are, the more indigenous you see them, the easier it's gonna be. And can you imagine, these guys already like left everything behind to cross the border to send money to their families, and then here someone is like controlling that someone else like goes and pretends they are in love with them, so that that money that it's supposed to go back to their home countries stays in there. So there's a whole like ecosystem. That's what I'm trying to tell you, you know.
No,
and
taking
then
advantage of their loneliness. I mean,
exactly,
really profiting on their loneliness.
Exactly. And so that's the system of taking advantage, and all in favor of money, you know. And the guy who has the guy who owns the business, who is exploiting the woman, who is exploiting the immigrant, it's also exploited by the landlord, you know. And the landlord is like, it's just like, and that's Queens. Well, many places, I guess. Huh?
Good. We've got a huge number of questions, and I've got a few more, but I think I'm going to switch over because it keeps growing every time I look at it. So let me see if I can get some questions from our audience here. Let me just open this up. Okay. And one of the questions, a very interesting one, did you find the pace of this film intuitively, or did you plan it ahead of time?
Intuitively, I had a feeling, but it's like a sense, like it's something abstract. But yeah, pretty much it was intuitively. Sometimes there was like an impulse or an intention to wanting to hold on even longer in certain things, but also all of the opposite. But there was a reason for everything, you know, to be there. You know, for example, like the drive-by is just one scene, one take. There's no cuts. We were not interested in cutting and blah blah and close up on the bullets flying, and the dancing in the market, you know, it's also like one take, you know, like and it lasts the same amount of time. So it was the idea of like compare how one thing can take up spontaneously just like the other, you know. So and that pretty much that dictate the pacing, also like being there observing. And we were trying to be subtle, you know. And sometimes people say like, oh, this is like a documentary, and for me it's a compliment. but yeah, it was like this, like betting on juxtaposition of these small moments maybe, you know. And for that we needed patience, you know. And so we had a feeling of what it should be like, of being with them, you know.
Right. Another good question that we had was about the location scouting. And can you talk about the specific locations you chose, both in Monterrey and also in Queens?
Yes. So in Monterrey, it was like, oh my God, where do we shoot? Everything is incredibly, like appealing, and have like, if we're here, it has this advantage or this other. So it was a matter of like, like sometimes deciding we are gonna, for example, one thing, that street that is like crazy, it's not
Yeah.
actually that connected to that place, so it's a license. People from Monterrey will know that there's no geographical logic there, but I wanted that. Or the other one with the like the wall that it's like a mohawk on the mountain. So those I found when I was like going there and asking taxi drivers to take me to places, and show me these places. And even the location scouters sometimes didn't know. Some they say, oh, this might be dangerous, let me see, or I cannot be responsible for this one in particularly. But then people from the community were super open. At some points, production would tell me like, hey, that house that you love over there at the top of the hill, our department is saying that they can completely recreate it down, and you will give me a break, that not having to go with the trucks all over there. And I mean, because the cars cannot come in, and the staff carrying all the thing. Are you okay if we reproduce it, that one here? Absolutely. So then we shoot the exterior up there and the interior down here. So it was like a combination of like, this one we need to shoot it where it is. This one, no. In Monterrey, it just happened very naturally, very organically. In New York, though, it was whatever we could. It's very, very, very difficult. So it is hostile, difficult, expensive. So it was more of like Jerry Kim, who is our dear producer. He also is a location manager, and he just did magic. And that room at the top, the roof
Sure.
we have to build, because we wanted to be that close to the subway. For me, it was just like, these characters are gonna, like, we're gonna pretend that they're connecting, and maybe there's like a love thing there. And we wanted that, like the first time they touch each other's hand, like the subway passes as if it's a shooting star, or as if it's the river, like. So for me, it was just like that, part of that Queens environment, and I really wanted to have the subway here all of the time.
Yeah, that young woman is very good also. Was she somebody you just discovered during the casting?
Yes. Angelina, she had acted in a couple of short films, and also she's a ballerina and a dancer of like traditional Chinese dance, and she's incredible. She's very funny. She's just such a character. For her, everything was like super easy and smooth, and yes, and when she and Juan Daniel met for the first time, he didn't know any English, and we just left them alone for a couple of days, and she was the one, like figuring out how to communicate and drawing and stuff, or using this phone. Then we took her phone, and they became good friends. No, she's a treasure, and we found her through, we put a post on one of those casting websites, in which you're looking for someone. And
Oh, great. Another good question we have from one of the viewers is, can you talk about the dance sequences? That they're really beautiful. And he was wondering, or this person, I'm not sure who, a man or a woman, whether or not they were choreographed, or how you did them. Did the dancers just do them, or did you kind of plan them in a certain way, especially in terms of how you shot them?
Exactly. So we were one thing that it's very worth mentioning is that, like very young people have like they're so used to being on cameras because phones and everything, like, so we would come and see the playback, and I would say like, look, if you dance here, then you are blocking her, and the way we need to frame this is in such way that we don't have to move, because we don't move, as you know, never. So do you think you could dance here, and maybe we do that there? So for me, it was very important not to over polish any choreograph, like it was just them flowing, and at some point we would just put certain accents, or like I would say like, oh, here, can you finish a little bit faster, because she needs to come dance before. And so there was not so much of a choreography. It was just like blocking with their own dance steps. And by then Juan Daniel already had like a big library of steps to pull out, you know.
Okay. See another one here. Could you talk about, in a way, the film is kind of a mirror of you, someone who has been between Mexico and the United States. And could you talk in a way, without perhaps getting too personal, about how the film reflects your own experience as someone who has really crossed borders?
Yeah, of course. Well, as you know, Richard, I came to the US to study at Columbia, and when I did this film, I didn't know if there was what was in there of mine. You know, I knew what I was like trying to respond to or against, maybe like what I was telling you about this certain kind of like filmmaking, or like reinforcement of stereotypes, or like all of like the immigrant story, like do everyone wants to stay here, wants to make it here. It's not always about the American dream. Not every Mexican here comes from the same place, you know, or like those were things that were important for me. If I have to say that there's something of mine and in the film, is the fact that I am myself a terco, you know, like terco is stubborn, and I push for this film for it the way I wanted it to be. Sometimes I got like at some screen labs that tell people telling me, no, they have to fall in love and he stays, and I'm like, well, I for a fact know the ending, so thank you very much, but not really. And so, but then in retrospect, Richard, looking back, I think that my situation is not at all comparable to Ulysses, but I felt that there was some sort of a feeling of, you know, like this idea of going somewhere because it's supposed to be for the better, for something that is going to be good for you, and then when you are there, it doesn't feel like that. It feels very different. And when I was studying at school here in New York, it just felt different. You know, it just maybe it was yeah, I don't know, it just felt like I I dreamed of something very different in terms of like how could I approach things. And then I felt like I needed to do things in a coldly and more controlled way, you know, more engineering of the story. And then for me it's very difficult to try to make a film if I don't really connect, or I'm passionate and even like chaotic in my process. So at some moments, even though the experience of like school was incredible, at some moments I felt like this was supposed to be better, and it's not.
We were just trying to show you what the real world was like, Fernando. That's all. Tell us a little bit about production in Mexico now. What's the place for a film such as yours in terms of the overall kind of commercial circuit and you have your two enormous chains which run really all of Mexican cinema. Talk a little bit about, for someone like you, in my mind, an independent artist who is making films in Mexico now.
Well, right now I think we're heading to like one big chain, because one of them it's like apparently collapsing and closing because of the pandemic. But I think, look, Mexico is the 11th country in size, but it's the fourth in terms of people watching films and assisting and actually going to the theater. Yeah. And we have a tradition, as you know, we have the golden age of Mexican cinema. We have recognition from like in like opposite side of the spectrum, you know, very big names, you know, and very different kind of filmmaking. But for me, this is very special, and I feel lucky that this film shows a little bit of like a before and after, because like sometimes audiences are underestimated, and things have to be like either commercial or, you know, artistic, and artistic means that it's a suicide commercially, you know. And this film, you know, it didn't premiere at any international festival outside Mexico. It premiered at my dearest Morelia, who I really love, you know. But it started writing its story in Mexico, and it's something that I haven't seen before. From Mexico, it has expanded, and look where we are right now. We're talking here to you, and that's crazy. Normally, it's the other way around. Sometimes it has to be known outside, and then it filters, and then it just stays in a sphere of people who watches films. This has like proved we have a lot of support, and people almost like rooting for us in this race as if it was a sports, and they've shown love in such incredible ways, like recreating the films, making like a 6-year-old kid made his party theme Los Tercos, and people talking about representation because of the film in Mexico. And a whole when the film premiered, people in Monterrey said, this is terrible, Netflix, how dare you? People in other places of the world are going to think that we are like that, bad taste and nacos and delinquents and social media and other people neutralize those comments, and say like, well, this is the point of the film, how we look at each other, and so I am very happy to be in this position. And right now I hope the film helps a very difficult moment in Mexican cinema with cuts to public funding, or wanting to reinvent or fix things that were not broken, just because of like an administration that wants to start everything from scratch. And it's a pity, because it affects not only film but culture and arts in general. And we had an incredible IMCINE, a Mexican Film Institute, doing marvelous work. So I hope the film and where it is right now helps, for impulse for these public laws about film and support, and that it can continue being like something that Mexico lately has been well known for.
We've also had a few questions just about your influences, films or filmmakers who you feel might have really marked your work or given you some ideas or inspired you, perhaps.
Of course, I don't know, particularly in this film. In this film, Damian is the DP. We talk a lot about like still photography, but and also literature and the music. The music, they take many things. But I have to say, for me, like I love Kaurismäki. I love Costa Gabras, especially Z. Edward Yang. It's someone who I love. Xiaiming Liang. So I don't know specifically, but some people have told me, that they can see some of these things. There's a little bit of like a homage to Jarmusch Sin and Mystery Train, where like they know, of course. And I love when characters in Kaurismäki, they are playing with all this seriousness, and but it's like very sweet. And for me, when my characters don't speak the same language, I like that. There's a film that's called Drifting Clouds from Aki Kaurismäki,
right,
which is my favorite.
Yeah, that's good. And finally, can you tell us the title of the film? Why did you call the film? I'm not here. We'll call the film the title.
Yeah, for me, I feel it's a little self-explanatory, because it's well, just like as the character being named Ulysses, just as in the Odyssey, of course, wanting to go back home. But Ya no estoy aquí. I think it plays better a little bit maybe in Spanish, but I'm no longer here. It's just this idea, that even though I'm physically here, of course, like my mind and my heart stays somewhere else. And then even though he comes back to Monterrey and he's here, he's already not here, because, after that experience, migrating, all of his Tercos family disintegrated, and one of them is dead, and who is he if he doesn't have this these cumbias? The whole film is about the lack of opportunities, the lack of social upward mobilities, and the slow down cumbia is like a metaphor of like this fast expiring youth. By the age 15, 16, you are either hooked on drugs, or you're a hitman working for cartels, or you have kids already. So you don't want the music to stop, because you want to keep dancing. So the I'm no longer here is that sense of oneself, and that like, who am I without what I like, what I love,
Yeah. It was actually something I think you did very effectively, was at the end of the film, when he's back in Monterrey, it doesn't look at all like the Monterrey we've seen in the flashbacks, which has been a warmer, more communal. I mean, suddenly it feels like this cold place that he doesn't really know. And of course, he's very different.
Yeah, I mean, the film is set in 2010, 2011, when there was like the war on this between these two cartels, and that strategy in which the government replaced the police with the army, and they sent the army to the streets, but in such bad way that the army was like very abusive to people, and people of course took the side of like the cartels because they knew they could actually see their faces, and they look like them. It's not like an army just like, you know, breaking into your house.
Yeah. You know, that sequence where you have the people on the truck handing out, I don't know, food bags or whatever. I mean, that's, you know, one of those things we never see, that side of the cartels, and why people actually, if not support them, you know, allow them to be.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Remember years ago, I had an Italian filmmaker told me that he was from Sicily and his father was a doctor. And if the father wanted penicillin, he could write to the company and he'd get penicillin in 2 months, or he could talk to the mafia and have it in 2 days.
Yeah, of course, the same. No, I mean, I've seen things too, like, you know, there's towns where they have like the school, the hospital, the kindergarten, daycare, you know, and everything comes courtesy of them. Like, who are the people are gonna, like, you know, like Monterrey, it's so rich in nature, you know, but then there's like all these cement companies, and then the privatization of everything, but also like the beer is subsidized, so it's cheaper. And the urban design is almost like people don't come from your periphery to our downtown, you know, stay there, and there's no places for them to play. There's no playgrounds, there's no basketball courts, everything is privatized, you know, like so when, and the whole, you know, this is, I'm glad you say this. When I was at Columbia, I had to pay back for a scholarship that I had in Mexico, Fonca, and I chose to give workshops, and I went to the border towns, and this is 2011, and a kid in Reynosa asked me my age. I was 30, and he said that by my age he would be dead. And I said, wow, why? He said, because I'd rather experiencing life and its pleasures, even if it's 1 year, than living a life in poverty. And who are we to judge? You know, like, we understand, so, you know, like, so the whole idea was to a little bit place ourselves in the position of this youth, you know, and that ending that you talk about, like, well, just like him, how many more, you know?
Well, we hope there are many more from you. Can you give us any thought on your next projects? Has that already begun, or you're still working on getting this film out?
Both. I'm still working on getting this film out, but then because of this film, I've had like a big amount of people reaching out with their stories. You know, some people very similar to Juan Daniel, the main actor, and there's one that particularly caught my attention of a young guy in prison. But also, before I finished, I engaged in a project that it's a Mexican dark comedy based on a novel, but it's set in Barcelona, and I hope to shoot at the end of this year.
Would you think of perhaps making a film in the US? I mean, one of the things about, well, generation above you, the Iñárritus and the Cuarons and whatever, is they've been able to border hop in a way that really almost no other national filmmakers can. Would making a film only in the US be something that would appeal to you?
Yes, definitely. You know, as long as it's something that I deeply connect with, and maybe something small. Some, you know, Richard, I get some submissions.
I'm sure you do. I'm sure you do.
Because I'm, you know, bicultural, and Mexico and the US.
Of course, right? Yeah.
But for me, we have to start talking not only about quota and agendas and representation. I think the real representation, it's in and you know this very well, it's in the architecture and the structure of the stories, you know, just like the structures of languages, you know, and it's not about telling the same story with a different color. So until I don't really connect with something here that makes me feel attracted to, then I might wait a little bit.
And finally, can you talk a little bit about your experience on television? You made that six or seven part series, Los Spookies. How was that?
That was fun. That was shot in Chile. It was fun. It's funny. There's an episode that actually it's influenced by something that happened in the film, because after we shot in Mexico, I'm no longer here, and then we had to wait for a whole year because Juan Daniel couldn't get his stamp on the visa, even though the visa was approved. He couldn't get it. So I was so stressed when I was doing Los Spookies that the writers wrote an episode about these kids having to go to the US to get visas for an actor. And it was, I mean, there's one guy there that it's just like someone I admire incredibly. His name is Julio Torres. He comes from El Salvador. He's genius. And so it was incredibly incredibly cool to be there, you know, shooting in Chile. Something very, very funny in a different way, and it was just playful, you know, so it was cool to have that experience.
Yeah. Did you find Chile very different from Mexico?
So different. So no, not only from Mexico, from the rest of Latin America. And I was there for 5 months. I was like, wow, why can I be in Buenos Aires or Bogota or Medellin or Sao Paulo? No, it's just, but
it's very different. It's very different.
It's very different, and it has the best of the two worlds, you know, like production wise it was incredible. I was with Fabula and it was incredible, but also it was colder than any other country in Latin America, where like there's a little bit more flexibility, and you know what I'm talking about. It was a different experience, and I was there for like 5 months.
Yeah, wow, that's a long time.
Yeah.
Anyway, Fernando, thank you so much. This has really been wonderfully enlightening and really a great way to learn more about the film, and best of luck to you. It's a terrific work, and everybody back at Columbia is really proud.
Richard, thank you very much. Thank you to American Cinematheque. Richard, it's been incredible to see you again, Richard.
Good.
Thank you, Fernando. Thank you, Richard, for this terrific conversation, and thank you for sharing your film with our audience, Fernando.